The aging process can take a toll on our lives, but don't worry, there are things that can be done to help us get through it. I'm Sarah Bernard, and today on The Issues, we'll focus on lifestyle medicine as we age. However, this has nothing to do with medications. We have a panel to talk about the issues of aging, as well as some resolutions and ideas. That's all coming up on this episode of The Issues. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Today's panel will consist of a couple of professionals who will discuss some of the issues that we all face as we age. But first, let's take a look at a video.
My name is Alice Mchugh. I am a volunteer with St. Louis Oasis. I'm also a class coordinator and a class facilitator. What I did professionally before I retired, I worked for 39 years with the St. Louis Public Schools. I have been involved with Oasis for about 8 or 9 years. A friend encouraged me to become a member. She says, it's free, go ahead and join, which I did. And I wound up going to more classes than she has. But we have been to cooking classes, I've done hula hoop, tai chi, better balance. I have been on tours, to lectures, just very involved that way as a member. And also as a volunteer, I have been trained to teach healthy habits, healthy choices with diabetes, a matter of balance and exercise. The Oasis organization teaches lifelong learning skills. It also teaches us how to be more physical because when you retire, most people just sit at home that first year and we're tired. Through Oasis, I've learned to slow down a little bit, go out and enjoy other people in the world and see what they do. So I have enjoyed Oasis tremendously doing the different things that I have been involved in.
It looks like Alice Mchugh found a nice way through Oasis, and thanks for sharing that with us, Alice. Now let's get to our panel. First, we have Dr. Susan Friedman, Professor of Medicine at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry, and she's also the Medical Director of the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Group in New York. And she has researched in health services, which include long-term care, fall, and fractures in older adults. Welcome, Dr. Friedman. So glad to have you with us from New York. It's really quite an honor to have you. Did we get all of your titles correct there?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and we also have Juliet Simone, who is the National Health and Program Director at Oasis, and she's based here in St. Louis, but Oasis is a national organization. But locally, it's a nonprofit organization that focuses on healthy aging, and her focus is to improve the health issues that are faced by older adults in our community here in St. Louis. So welcome, Juliet. So glad you could join us right here in our own city.
Thank you, Sarah.
So, all right, so let's have a chat with both of you, and we want to start with you, Dr. Friedman, to talk about lifestyle medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So lifestyle medicine is a brand new field of medicine. The first ever boards for lifestyle medicine were given in 2017. And the idea of this is that the estimates are about 3/4, 70 to 80% of our chronic disease in this country could be prevented, slowed down, reversed through optimal efforts at lifestyle. So things like nutrition, physical activity, stress reduction, getting good sleep, good socialization, which is such an important piece as we get older, and avoiding toxic substances like tobacco and alcohol and other drugs. So that's the premise of lifestyle medicine and the promise of lifestyle medicine.
So is there a certain age at which you start seeing patients who need to be thinking about these things, or is it something that we should be paying attention to at all stages of our lives?
Yeah, really good question. I think So I'm a geriatrician by training, by my original training. So I'm used to taking care of older adults. But as I have thought more and more about healthy aging and trying to promote it, I've realized that the earlier that we can start, the better. Now, having said that, there's almost never a point at which you can't make improvements that can improve your health and well-being. But really, healthy aging starts day one, so that the chronic conditions that we see at age 70 and 80 really get their start early in life. So lots of opportunities for prevention and health promotion.
Yeah, I know when I remember working out with a trainer when I was in my early 40s, and he would tell me that the work I was doing with him was not really about that moment. It was more about when I'm 80. He said, this is going to affect you more when you're 80, the work that you're doing now, than it is right now. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we see problems like the hip fracture. I deal a lot with patients who have fragility fractures. So, fractures that are a function of having osteoporosis. Well, osteoporosis and fractures are in part a result of what your peak bone mass is at age 30. So you reach your maximum bone density around age 30. And so in order to build that peak bone mass, you have to be physically active as a child and young adult. You have to have good nutrition and so forth. And then you have to maintain that over the middle years. So that if you haven't managed to do that, it's much more, it makes it much more likely that you would have a fracture later in life. Another example would be heart disease that we see showing up. It could show up at age 70 or 80, it could show up at age 50 or 60, and these days even earlier, unfortunately. But we see the earliest beginnings of atherosclerosis, which is the process that leads to heart attacks. We see that in people who are teenagers. It's best to start early. It's almost never too late, but yeah, it's a life cycle process.
So, do you see any differences in the aging, the lifestyle issues that you're talking about in men versus women? Or do we age differently in a different pace?
That's a really good question. Yes, the short answer is yes. I think women, outlive men by several years. And what tends to happen is that women have a higher rate of developing disability as time goes on. And so issues like functional impairment, mobility impairment, those kind of things. Multiple chronic conditions where for men it's more of a mortality issue, to put it kind of starkly. But yes, there are certainly differences.
Mm-hmm. So, Juliet, let's jump to you and talk about the work that you're doing with Oasis. And before we get to all the different things that you offer the community, which there's so many great enrichment opportunities through Oasis, what are some of the things that you're working with this population that Dr. Friedman's talking about, this aging group? What is the age that people start coming into Oasis looking for diversity in their life?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Although we don't really have like a hard start date for when you are an older adult that is sort of eligible to join Oasis, the average age of our participants is usually in their late 60s to early 70s. But you're, again, not really too young and certainly never too old to join.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of jump off of what Dr. Friedman said too, many of the health issues that are prevalent in older adults from a community health standpoint are really focused on an accumulation of lifetime of a lifetime of lifestyles and choices that then can accumulate to, chronic conditions. So, we do see in St. Louis here, a pretty high prevalence of diabetes. Of course, we see heart disease and arthritis like many older populations. But for some reason, the state of Missouri has a higher prevalence and injury rate due to falls than other states. And we have no idea why. There doesn't seem to be anything unique about our older adults or our environment that makes that a riskier event, but there is a higher prevalence. And also, as Dr. Friedman also mentioned, social isolation is a really important health issue to address. And, fortunately, within the last handful of years, it seems to have gotten a lot more attention than it ever had. And I think that's, for a few reasons, but, one of them is in the last decade, specifically the last, I think, 50 or 60 years, we are sort of systematically isolating older adults in our communities. We don't generally live together as families, throughout someone's lifespan. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, caring for an older adult just isn't quite possible with work schedules and all, things like that. But it's certainly social isolation has certainly gotten the attention it deserves and has been viewed as a public health problem in the last several years.
And this year, 2020, with the pandemic and us having forced to be socially isolated is definitely taking a toll on older adults. I see it in my own life. I see it with my parents who are very sad and lonely and so much want to be with everybody. And, Dr. Friedman, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that coming up in your work with this pandemic and affecting people's physical health?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you say, the need for physical distancing has really been a huge burden for older adults. I think, especially, across the spectrum. So older adults who are in long-term care, as well as those who are living in the community. Some older adults are very good with technology, others are not. And so that's just one extra layer of challenges that has, been part of this. But just, we evolved as social beings. And so being in the presence of other people is a really critical piece of what makes us human. And so, I think the last several months have really taken a toll. And what we see, I think, oftentimes is as people get older and more frail, the impact of certain things is seen most quickly in the old and frail. And so in some ways, our older adults are the canary in the coal mine. So if, if something is going to impact, we're going to see it with our frail elders more quickly.
Yeah, and Juliet, I'm starting to hear and see a lot of older adults in our community here in St. Louis just saying, you know what, I'm done being isolated. I'm getting together with my friends. Are you seeing that in the group in your population of Oasis? Some of that attitude?
Well, our in-person classes are all still on suspended. So not personally through Oasis, but I'm not surprised that people are having some of the COVID fatigue, as I've heard it called. And, I think we're all in this a lot longer than we anticipated. And I think that now the data are showing that we can expect to be in this situation for a lot longer. When we all packed up that one day in March, it was like, see you in 2 weeks. And here we are sort of planning through 2021.
Right.
So, I think that there is a balance to be struck, to find ways to remain socially engaged, and especially to exercise, even though that may not look the same way that it once did in a public space with a room full of strangers. That sounds insane now. But to find that balance between the social isolation and being, sort of responsible in it for reducing your risk of catching or spreading COVID. So, I think having a sort of trusted bubble in your life to make sure that you are getting some of your social needs, is probably important at this point, because
Right.
us can be without contact for what may end up being closer to 2 years.
Yeah. So just like any health issue that comes up in our lives and in our world, there's always going to be something new, right? And we have to learn how to adapt our lifestyles, which we're talking about, to continue to stay healthy, whether it's this current situation, the pandemic, or if it's tripping and falling and bone health and all those other things. So we've heard some of the issues on aging, but the good news is that there are some resolutions to the aging process. And when we come back, we're going to share some of these ways that lifestyle medicine can help. So stay with us.
Do you want to know what city government is doing for you?
Yes, Mr. President. Board Bill 69 committee substitutes the budget bill for the Parking Commission. And this bill is a big deal and a great deal for the citizens of the city of St. Louis.
Watch STL TV, the city government channel, then you'll know.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, today's topic is lifestyle medicine as we age. Our professionals have just shared some issues that impact the aging process, and now we'd like to share some ideas for resolutions and ideas that help us all as we get older. So to our panel, what can we do to help this process? Let's start with Dr. Friedman and all the work that you're doing with lifestyle medicine. What are some of the things now that as we talked a little bit about some of the things we can do starting out, like with good lifestyle, starting at a young age, but we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s now. It's never too late. What are some things that you recommend to your patients?
Yeah, so when I think about this, I think about sort of different frameworks that have been shown to be useful. There is a concept called the blue zones, and this is something that first got me interested in the whole realm of healthy aging. So blue zones are places around the world where people age healthily, and so they live a long time, but they don't just live a long time. They live with low levels, low prevalence of chronic disease and high levels of function, cognition, and engagement in their communities. And yeah,
the blue zones, where are these places? Name some of these. Are they?
Yeah, so the original blue zones, there were 5 across the world: Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Ikaria, Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and the only original one in the United States is Loma Linda, California. And so Dan Buettner was the person who really went to these different areas around the world to talk to people and interview them and to try to find some commonalities in terms of what was their secret to success. And he came up with 9 different components, but I kind of boil it down to what I call the 3-legged stool, which is it's what we eat, it's how we move, and how we interact with each other. And it's not necessarily in that order, because I think how we interact with each other is so critically important. But just in terms of what we eat, the commonalities that he found around the world were a focus on whole plant foods. So the more vegetables, fruits, whole grains, things like beans and peas and lentils, those those kind of foods that people were able to incorporate into their diet, the better. And all of these original blue zones have a lot of these whole foods and not a lot of processed foods. So all the junk food that we tend to eat. And then in terms of movement, physical activity is so important, especially as we age. You had mentioned before about exercising for the future, because there's this process that is a natural part of aging called sarcopenia. And what that means is it's muscle loss. And it's something that happens over time to all of us, but we can mitigate it by exercise. And so the older we get, the more important that gets. And especially around age 75, we find that muscle mass really declines at a sharper rate. So exercise is really important. And then the third part of that three-legged stool is really socialization. And we talked a little bit about that in terms of the pandemic, but having meaningful relationships, maintaining a sense of meaning and purpose. So actually, two of the blue zones have special names for that. In Okinawa, there's a term ikigai, and in Costa Rica, it's plan de vida. And what both of those translate to is, why do you get up in the morning? So what is your reason for continuing on? And so thinking about that, and I think especially after we retire, a lot of us, sort of find a lot of our meaning and purpose through our work, but trying to repurpose that and find other ways to maintain that sense and to have meaningful contributions to the community.
Yeah, I think that's where Juliet's work comes in with Oasis. I mean, it's such a perfect segue because I love the three-legged stool, the move, eat, and interact. And my guess, Juliet, is that third leg, that interaction, is where Oasis finds its strength. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely, Sarah. And we, the one element that kind of weaves together all of the things that Oasis does is engagement and interaction, which thus in turn reduces social isolation and the negative health impact that can result from that isolation. So, not only do we have, a huge menu of lifelong learning classes that range from history to technology literacy to creative writing groups and just about anything you can think of, keeps the mind sharp and fresh. It keeps you interested in new things and interesting. But of course, the social the social connectedness is part of the experience. However, to speak to Dr. Friedman's points on purpose, one of the pillars of Oasis's mission is also to engage older adults in meaningful volunteer opportunities as well, to make sure that sense of purpose carries into those retirement years. We have many different ways that older adults can get engaged and remain engaged. Our flagship volunteering opportunity is being an intergenerational tutor. So across the country, Oasis have about 5,000 older adult tutors that tutor 22,000 kindergarten through third graders on literacy. And of course, we're being creative with how that looks the fall of 2020. Much of that has been repurposed in a virtual way. But again, that means that we can reach new children and new older adults, with geography not being a boundary. So we find that, the health of a tutor will increase without directly taking any health programs, in part because they really want to take better care of themselves so that they can be there every week for that child. We've seen an uptick in self-reported flu shots of older adults because they don't want to be sick and miss their weekly interaction with their students. So we know that that interaction is a huge part of what draws Oasis participants from across the country. And that's something that's been, the biggest challenge, I think, to pivot our work during, these COVID times is to best we can recreate that that connection and that experience virtually.
Mm-hmm. How many members are there of Oasis, both in the St. Louis area and also nationally? Do you know those numbers?
I think we have around 8,000 enrollments every year in St. Louis. We have about 2,200 tutors in the St. Louis area. And across the country, I think that looks more like 50 to 70,000 enrollments. And as I mentioned, about 5,000 tutors.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Friedman, you are on the national board for Oasis, is that correct?
No, I'm on the Rochester board. So we are very fortunate in Rochester, New York, to also have an Oasis branch. And it's a fabulous program. In so many ways, it is just great at promoting healthy aging.
Mm-hmm. Now, since we're talking to you again a little bit about this aging and going back to your three-legged stool, you had mentioned exercise movement. What are some safe types of exercises that older people can do, whether they've been active or not active? You had said earlier it's never too late to start. So what would you recommend in both cases?
Yeah, so I think what I always tell my patients is you got to start with where you are. So if you have been, sedentary, I would not encourage you to get up and try to run a 5K or a 10K race, right? Really, getting back to the blue zones and that model, what happens in those communities is that people are just active. And so it's not that they're going out to exercise, they're just not sedentary. So the first step, that first rung in the ladder is just getting up and moving. So going for a walk. And if you get no exercise at all, usually, going for a 5 or 10 minute walk and then building on that. There are certainly national recommendations in terms of how much exercise we should be getting. And the recommendations are that at a minimum, all adults should be getting 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. And then for maximal benefits up to 300. So that's about an hour 5 times a week. But again, if you're not there, if you don't do any physical activity or any exercise, usually the thing is to start low, go slow. That's kind of a mantra in geriatrics. But go is the follow-up to that.
Exercise, a lot of people will complain about not being able to move. They have a lot of arthritis pain and this and that, but what they don't realize perhaps is how movement can really help that kind of pain. So just getting out and doing anything at any age. I love this idea of it's never too late, because a lot of people who have had sedentary lifestyles throughout their life might feel like there's no reason to start now, but you've given us so many reasons. And this whole idea, the studies that you've done on these blue zones, is just so fascinating. So I think we're going to wrap up now. Unfortunately, great discussion. I really appreciate both of you being here and being a part of this. We've learned that there's things that we all need to be doing at any age and all ages. So whether you're viewing now and you're in your 20s or in your 70s, it is time to start thinking about what it's going to be like when you're in your 80s. It's never too early to start thinking long-term so that you're there and here to enjoy that time. So thank you both again. And one last thing that I want to mention is gratitude is great medicine, and we can't forget that. And I really am truly thankful to our guests today and to all of our viewers for being a part of this. And we have to always remember to show our gratitude to those around us, especially during these trying times right now. So thanks to all of you for tuning in to the issues and for sharing your comments. And I just want to remind all of you that you can join the discussion. We are very active on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram. And don't forget to download the STL TV app. We are right here, ready to listen to you all the time. So next time on the issues, we're going to get into something even more serious, if there is anything more serious in our health, and that is we're going to be tuning in and talking about Black Lives Matter. So we want to, do you really understand what that means? Do any of us really understand what that means? That's going to be our discussion on the next issue or the next edition of the issues. So see you next time, and keep it right here on STL TV and Experience St. Louis.